Namaste, guys. This is In Cyanosis with Quantum Healing Consciousness and Higher Vibes Tribe. How goes it, guys? How are you? And most importantly, how do you feel right now in this moment where you are in your body? I like to start these off with some self awareness. How am I feeling in this moment? How are you feeling in this moment? Let's do a quick, check in with ourselves before we dive in. Now, I will be speaking quantum healing in this multidimensional reality in which we all reside. So, everything is energy. Words define energy, so that we can have preference. So, are you guys negotiating your non negotiables? That's a key question. Are you ready to stop negotiating your non negotiables? Are you consciously doing things in your now reality, that's like trying to get to a better mental or emotional space, but yet you're still met with, in your external environment, some type of stressor, right? Like, I want to look at this and I want to look at the underlying cause. When I speak of trauma baselines, I'm gonna quote Dr. Perry here. He's a childhood trauma specialist. So, what is trauma? Trauma is an experience or a pattern of experiences that impairs the proper functioning of the person's stress response system, making it more reactive or sensitive, right? So, trauma, we can accumulate trauma because it's both, oh, same time yesterday. It's 1344. That's 444, guys. So, trauma is accumulative, both, psychologically and physiologically, and our memory is encoded in the hippocampus through cortisol spikes. So that's where the memory markers are in our bloodstream. So if we've experienced stress at any point in time in our childhood, especially the first 7 years, which we're in all theta state, then that stressor memory is encoded in that cortisol spike. So we can accumulate trauma within our physical being, especially if we're prone to being reactive and our response to stress is like dissociation or hypervigilance or fawning or lying or pretending or being argumentative or having like microaggressions, like we can have these stress response adaptations, and we start to navigate through an anticipatory stress mode, where our default is set to sympathetic nervous system dominance, where we're on this fight, flight, freeze, fawn versus ease, and we're not getting into ease. We can amalgamate various coping mechanisms, and if we're really honest with ourselves, like, gossiping to feel better, or alcohol and drugs to numb out the feelings, or maybe we're playing games where we manipulate other people to get our needs met, or we're creating, varying dramas, even though we say like, oh, I am emphatically anti-drama, but yet we're still met in our reality with drama after drama after drama, and we feel like we have no control, right? Or am I ignoring my feelings? Or am I blaming other people for where I am in this now moment because I didn't choose to be here, right? Like it's someone else's fault, So when we start looking at objective truths, right? And without truth, we'll never want to see the cause, right? And the truth always allows for us to trace the effect back to its causal root, right? And without truth, we're just blindly hitting these effects and perpetuating it because of our subconscious, unconscious, emotional baseline magnetism, right? So where it's what's below the water in that Freud iceberg analogy that's kind of steering our ship, even though consciously what's above the water, we're consciously choosing to go left. If under the water, our unconscious emotions, if the trapped emotions within our physical form is pointing to the right, then you're going to be going right regardless, right? So when we talk about gaps in our auric field, or gaps, our open gates and malleability, that's the windows through which external influences and manipulations and stuff like that can get in and start affecting our choices, making choices for us that may not be in alignment with our soul's highest intention, or may not be in alignment with our mental, emotional, or physical well-being, and our spiritual well-being. So these gaps or holes, they come through like our beliefs, our emotions, our desires, our passions, our intentions, you know? And so when we look at these types of things, it's directly connected to trauma. To trauma, you know, usually we look at the first 7 years of trauma, but you can experience a trauma as a teenager or as an adult, and it still be affecting your choices now, So trauma is intrinsically individuated. What one person experiences as trauma and being traumatic, someone else can experience and brush it off as if it's nothing. And there's no right, wrong here. It's individuated. So, are you experiencing or having trouble with emotional flashbacks? Do you have a tyrannical inner or outer critic? Do you struggle with toxic shame? Do you struggle with self-abandonment, or have abandonment issues? Do you struggle with social anxiety? Or do you have abject feelings of loneliness and abandonment? Do you have a fragile self-esteem? Are you having attachment disorders? Do you have developmental arrest? Are your relationships difficult to maintain? Do they feel chaotic to you? Do you have radical mood vacillations? Do like where you're up, down, all over the chart with your mood in any given day, right? Like, do you struggle with dissociation via distracting yourself with activities or other mental processes? Do you have a hair triggered fight, flight, freeze, fawn type stress response? Are you oversensitive to stressful situations? Or do you struggle with, or have you struggled with in the past with suicidal type ideations, or, repeating thoughts? So these are things to look at relative to trauma. And this is taken out of the book by Dr. Peter Walker, Complex PTSD from Surviving to Thriving. So these are some of the things that are actually a complex PTSD type response to trauma, and you may struggle with developmental arrest too. So do you struggle with self-acceptance? A clear sense of identity, like it's taken me years, decades, if I'm really honest with myself, right, to figure out who I am. And I evolve moment to moment, right? So do you have self-compassion? Can you be compassionate for yourself in any emotion that you're experiencing? Can I had birds going for my cats, so it just popped off. All right, so do you struggle with like self-protection and feeling like you are worthy of even having that right to protect yourself, right? Or do you tend to vacillate to like auto accommodating through obligation, other people's needs and wants, even if it pulls you in harm's way, right? Do you have the capacity to draw comfort from relationships? How is your ability to relax? Like, can you just stop and relax without the inner critic kind of stepping up to the plate and starting the shame and like, oh, well, you should be doing this or doing that? Like, human doing, not human being, right? Like, can you really relax and just be still without judging yourself, or condemning yourself? Or even judging others for wanting to just have a lazy day, right? Do you have, how is your capacity for full self expression? Or do you minimize your light or your self expression depending upon your external environment? Do you truly own who you are unapologetically, your true authenticity without shame, fear, guilt? Or do you kind of auto accommodate your beingness, who you are, varying facades dependent upon, like if your family or like your church or your community or at work, or do you have a different face or facade or mode of being with each different thing? Or are you truly who you are in all times and owning your emotions? That struggle is real, right? Like, for anyone who resonates with what I'm saying and who is here on this same wavelength. So, what about willpower and motivation, right? Like, do you struggle with willpower and feeling like self-motivated, or is that like, is that is that a struggle that you deal with, right? Or do you just have willpower and you can set a goal and follow through? No worries there. Or is it struggling through resistance, right? Do you have peace of mind? How does that feel? Like, can you get to a space where you just feel at peace no matter what chaos is going on around you, and you're at peace regardless, and you feel sovereign regardless? Or do you struggle with like racing thoughts and like hypervigilance and just repeating scenarios in your heads of like, worst case scenario, and I could survive this worst case scenario, and no matter what, da 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 da, if this happens and this happens, then I could do this? Or can you just be at peace in any given moment regardless of what's going on around you, right? How is your self-care routines, guys? Like, do you fill your own cup first? Like, are you are you giving yourself what you need in any given moment before acquiescing, you could say, to someone else's reality or someone else's need from you? Are you practicing good self-care? And in self-care, I'll even say, like, I feel like my very, my beingness is my self-care. I live my life as like, you know I perceive my life as a ritual, to the extent that, my self-care is so important to me that I make time to tap into my emotions and be consciously aware of where I am, and just like deep cellular breathing and giving myself the time to feel anything I need to, regardless, right? Like, putting my needs before my husband's, putting my needs before my children's, to the extent that if I'm not embodying my body, and if I'm not fully present in my beingness, and I'm on automaton mode, like I'm in sympathetic dominance versus parasympathetic nervous system dominance, then I'm no good to them as a mom anyway. Like, I would just be like a program or some default mode network running the show versus my soul beingness, my very presence taking up the space of my body and making choices for me. So that's just something to look at as well. So can you believe that life is a gift, or do you feel that, life is a curse, right? Like, what lens are you perceiving through? How do you perceive life in this moment right now? And how does that feel to perceive it that way? Do you struggle with self esteem? You know? Do you have a high sense of self esteem naturally, regardless if someone outside of you is reflecting it back to you or not? Can you love yourself unapologetically and unconditionally, regardless of what other people think of you, right? Like, can you own your shit and still feel sovereign and know that you're beautiful, and no matter what state or phase of being you're moving through, right? And do you have self confidence? How is your sense of self confidence? You know, like, do you struggle feeling confident in your body in any given moment? So, these are some things that we can look at to kind of, feel out where we are in this now moment. Like, what am I feeling? What am I being? Where is my awareness? And if we can bring it back to our breath. And, trauma takes its toll on the body in many ways, guys, in many ways. So, most of the physiological damage of extended trauma, of like living in stress mode, of trauma compounded, occurs because we are forced to spend so much time in that hyper arousal state, stuck in fight, flight, freeze, or fawn, anticipatory stress mode, or our like sympathetic nervous system dominance. Like, these are just different ways to define the same energy, you know? And if so, then we can become chronically stressed out, and stuck in this sympathetic nervous system activation. And then we can compound like these somatic type energies in our body. Like, when I am on camera, when I see myself in the mirror, I am still subconsciously, somatically triggered to the extent that, it's my trauma showing itself and raising to the surface and showing me where I still need to give myself that unconditional love and unconditional acceptance. So, here are some of the most common examples of body harming reactions. So, again, this is detrimental somatic changes that can become ingrained in our bodies through trapped emotional trauma, through having trapped densities. So, these are things to really look at and be aware of, because they will create havoc, you could say, in your body, but also like your mental and emotional energy bodies as well. So, am I living in hypervigilance? Am I having like shallow and incomplete breathing? So, I catch myself shallow breathing all throughout the day, from time to time. And then that's just when I come into the awareness that I'm breathing shallow for whatever reason or however long, I just get back into parasympathetic dominance through flipping my dorsal vagal nerve switch, that valve, and owning up, taking up space in my body through that deep cellular breathing, guys. So, am I in constant adrenalization? Do I feel adrenalized, like constantly on edge, ready to go in any given moment? Or can I just fully take up space in my body and feel calm and at peace, right? Armoring. So, if you've never heard of armoring is like chronic muscle tightness. Now, this is something that that I did subconsciously for many years, not knowing, where when we are in this, this fight, flight, freeze, fawn stress mode, you could say, we tend to not relax. So we're not fully breathing in and feeling calm and at peace in our body. So our body is on like this stress mode, fight, response. And like, I struggled with even like laying in bed, stretching out and relaxing versus like having to just be like, we can manifest muscle spasms and muscle pains and aches and stuff like that, restless leg syndrome, these types of things from chronic, it's chronic muscle tightness, but it's through trauma armoring. This is somatic type things that we can go through and accumulate just from having unprocessed, unreleased trauma or trapped emotions in our body, in our beingness. So, wear and tear from rushing and armoring. So, are you always in a hurry? Like, are you, hurry up, got to get this done, got to get this done, got to get this done, got to get the dishes done before I do this, and then I hurry up and go do this. So, like, you're always rushing around in a hurry versus, like, moving at pace that feels comfortable and good? Or are you putting pressure on yourself to hurry up and get it done so that hurry up, hurry up, hurry up, right? We can have clumsiness, like accidents, trips, falls, bumping into things because we're always in a hurry and we're armoring, right? So the inability to be fully present, relaxed, and grounded in our bodies, that struggle is so real, especially if your nervous system is set on default mode to be in sympathetic dominance because you've had to all these years. It's what's kept you safe, right? That's what you felt like's kept you safe. So that just the inability to take up space in your body, it's so key, Those of us who have trauma baselines, the practice of embodying the body through breath is paramount to our true healing, the true quantum healing of our mind, body, heart, soul is the practice. It's a practice, guys. It's not something you do once and you're just automatically in it from now on. It's not like getting baptized as an infant, let's say, like it's a practice and it is a daily practice. And some days are easier than others, but every time I consciously choose to embody my body, I am moving through older programs. I am shown where I'm out of alignment. I am shown insights. I am shown, or I am moved through an emotion every time, however subtle or empowering or, powerful. Just, it's a practice. Make it a daily practice. Let that be a part of your self-care. I like to do the deep cellular breathing while I'm laying in bed before I get up out of bed in the mornings, and it's the last thing I do when I go to bed at night. And I do it in the shower. I'll do it when I use the bathroom. Anytime that I can consciously become aware and start breathing back into, it has gone a long way in my ability to maintain sovereign in my emotions, regardless of my external reality, situation, stimuli, etc., thus closing the gaps on my own malleability, right? So, do you have sleep problems from being overactivated? Do you struggle to go to sleep at night without having like racing thoughts? And then are you up and down all night because of a subtle, hypervigilance, you can say, because you're on guard, because you don't feel safe to fully take up space in your body? Do you struggle with digestive disorders from a tightened digestive tract? Like, how many of us with trauma baselines? I have just about so many people I've worked with, let's just say, so many people struggle with digestive issues just simply because of the trapped trauma, the trauma baselines. It's it's physiological accumulation of trauma compounded. So, and again, it's physiological damage from excessive self medication with alcohol, food, or drugs, too. That's something that a lot of us that have struggled with trapped trauma to whatever varying degree, it's been kind of like a part of that as well. Physiological damage from excessive self-medication with alcohol, food, or drugs. So, moreover, in cases of physical and sexual abuse, our capacities to be physically comforted by touch are eliminated or compromised. And in cases of verbal and emotional abuse, our capacities to be comforted by eye and voice contact are severely underdeveloped or seriously diminished. So, and that's something too that I have struggled with and have been healing myself, is just touch issues. It has been a trigger. The micro expressions, right? Like somatic healing, Dr. Peter Levine, and emotions revealed, Dr. Paul Ekman, talking about how we can read micro expressions, and people with trauma baselines, we tend to be hyper reactive around varying micro expressions. And Lord forbid we see some neutral tone, right? Like, albeit in the voice or a text or even a neutral face, can really trigger that hypervigilance, hyperreactivity, autoaccomatory type stress response from us as well. So these are just things to be aware of. Now, when we look at, like, how can we rewrite our code if we're struggling with all this, right? How can we become aware? What behavior or patterns would you like to change in your life? Like, what behavior and patterns are aligned to varying emotions, right? And what pattern is repeating in your reality, right? What's showing its head? Because these are linked to your openings in your human design chart, as well as like gaps in your auric field, as well as, that's our malleability, guys. It's our, so we can look at varying ways that the mind, the not self themes in human design, the mind tries to kind of hijack our choices for us, So I'm just going to go through these 9 real quick, and then I will, then I'll sign it off. So if you have an open gate, so if you have a white area in your human design chart, that's where you come in open and reflective, right? That's where you come into life malleable, you could say, because you're open and reflective in those areas. But no, too, you can have trauma in your defined areas. So the parts of your human design gate that's colored. And if you have trauma in any one of these areas, then you are malleable to the extent, and then we can hijack ourselves, right? Like our not self themes, you can say. Like for me, I'm either I'm in frustration or I'm in satisfaction, right? So regardless of what triggers me outside of me, right? Regardless of my external reality, if I'm triggered through, if I'm pulled out of satisfaction, and whatever satisfaction feels like for me in any given moment, then it's through I'm being frustrated. I'm in frustration. So that's my not self theme. So is it one of these 9 areas? So the head, am I occupied with questions that do not matter? And no, I have an open head gate and an open root gate that come in with that open. So for me, it's either the head or the root or anywhere in between where I have trauma. Okay. So the head is, am I occupied with questions that do not matter? The ajna, so the third eye. So am I pretending that I am mentally certain about something, but maybe I'm still uncertain, but I'm pretending to be mentally certain? I'm forcing myself through whatever, blah, blah, blah. It's the story I'm telling myself about myself, right? In the world around me and the people in it. Or is it 7, the throat, right? So trying to attract attention. So am I saying what I'm saying because I'm saying it within the full authority, my conscious authority, because this is truly what I think and how I feel, and I'm saying it because I want to say it? Or am I saying it to get someone's reaction or to attract attention in whatever moment, right? 6, the G center. So am I constantly trying to find love and direction? And am I seeking outside of myself to be validated? Because I'm not giving myself the love, that I'm seeking outside of me. I'm not giving it to myself. And no, how we love ourselves is indicative of how we teach others to love us. It's inclusive. How we love ourselves, it's reflective of the people that come to love us. So if we're not fully unconditionally loving ourselves, and we're loving ourselves only through specific facades and lenses, then that's what will come through. Okay. So if you want someone to love you fully, love you no matter what, love the true essence that is you, you must love you unapologetically, unconditionally. That's including your shame. That's including your shadows in the closet. That's including all the things that you want to like bury and hide away, right? No, love it, integrate it, embrace it, right? Because if I'm constantly seeking direction and love outside of me, then I'm not giving it to myself, and I'm only perpetuating disharmonies, you could say, in my life, right? All right, so 5, heart, the ego center. So am I trying to prove myself? Am I constantly trying to prove myself, or am I constantly improving myself because I'm not okay in this now moment as I am, right? Or do I love myself unconditionally in this now moment, and every step in the right direction feels good for me regardless? But am I doing this because I got to prove it to my parents, or prove it to the world, or prove it, am I pushing through the resistance, or am I like standing in power? Am I in force, or am I in the stillness of my power, my sovereignty, right? 4, the spleen. So am I holding on to what isn't good for me? Right. Now, the spleen is directly connected to addiction and fears, guys. So, and epigenetics too. So, like, regardless if you haven't amalgamated a lot of fears consciously in this life, let's say, but perhaps your DNA family lineage comes from, you know, like so many things, right, guys, that our ancestors could have, like the Great Depression or the Holocaust or like slavery or like so many different things, right, that can be connected to us in our bloodline through epigenetics. And maybe we're not aware of it. And then we have these subconscious fears that kind of keep us in resistance, keep us in like a force mode versus our power and our sovereignty. So becoming aware of what isn't good for me, and having the ability to consciously choose to let it go. Like, that's going to be key, regardless if you have an open or defined spleen. If you struggle with any type of addiction, regardless of what it is, or any type of fear, again, someone that has been consciously actively healing complex PTSD for the past decade, but I've struggled with it for a couple of decades. My spleen area was a great source of just learning how to integrate that, right? So looking at your spleen area. And again, I'm someone that lived in fear most of my life. So, all right. And then 3, the sacral center, not knowing when enough is enough. Now, the sacral center too, guys, can be a sense of superpower, even if it's not your true authority. Like, if you're an emotional authority, you need to give yourself 24 hours to ride that sine wave back to neutrality, right? Before you can make an empowered choice. But sometimes we don't always have 24 hours. Sometimes we need a definitive yes or no in this now moment. And we can't give, especially if you're a mama or a dad or, whatever's going on in your reality. There are moments where we can't put a pin in it and come back in 24 hours, right? So in those moments, learning how to master your sacral gate, you could say, your sacral authority, that's that Dr. Bradley Nelson has a lot of great videos on this. He's got a book called The Emotion Code, and he's got an app too called The Emotion Code that goes into learning the sacral power. So your body can tell you yes or no in any given moment through sway testing, okay? And there are other muscle testing type things too that you can learn and do. And Dr. Bradley Nelson has all that information. It's an excellent resource. I highly recommend, if you resonate with wanting to learn how to get your body to tell you yes or no in any given moment, you go check that out. All right, number 2, solar. So, am I avoiding confrontation and truth? Right? So, am I avoiding confrontation and truth? And I'm pushing through resistance because I don't want to look at my own patterning. I don't want to look at my own, like, where I am. I just want to bypass it, gloss it over, spiritual bypass it, right? Like, no, I am abundant. I am beautiful. I am da da da. But while still harboring unconscious beliefs, emotions, right, within us, that the toxic inner critic, that toxic shame, right, the story we're, telling ourselves that we're not worthy and all this stuff, we're not enough, right? So am I avoiding confrontation with truth, with other people, speaking my truth, owning myself unapologetically, being authentic, right? Or am I biting my tongue and not saying how I feel, or speaking my needs, and just building resentment and bitterness, and letting those things fester, right? And then 1, so the root, always in a hurry to be free from pressure. So if we struggle with root trauma, like sexual trauma, root trauma, or if we just have like trauma baselines and we struggle with embodying our body, and we're not taking up the space, and we're not tapping into and breathing down into fully grounding into our body in this now moment, right? Then this is a root center issue. Like for me, it's like, am I always in a hurry to be free from the pressure I put on myself to answer everyone else's questions before they ask? So that's head and root, right? But it could play in so many ways. So am I always in a hurry to be free from the pressure that I put on myself to answer everyone else's questions before they even ask it, because I'm pretending to mentally be certain that I know I need to answer this question. So I force the issue, that throat chakra, trying to attract attention, because I'm seeking love and direction and acceptance, because, hey, I've got the answer. I know what you need. I'm pushing this on you because I'm trying to prove myself, right? And am I holding on to what isn't good for me, which is the idea that, well, I'm a healer. I'm here to heal the world, and da 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 da, no, da da da. And I'm stuck in that, savior complex, right? So, and then again, not knowing when enough is enough, continue the perpetuation of the resistance. Like, and that's just one example, right? How we can struggle with all of these, and just being able to identify, right? Like being able to identify what we come in open, where we come in reflective, where we come in triggerable, and then also where we have trauma, where our body and our emotions are still signaling, hey, I'm here. Love me. Give me some love. Give me some acceptance. Breathe some life into me, right? So, and many of us have been marginalized or ostracized, right? Like scapegoated, gaslit, the black sheep of the family, you could say. Like, those of us who have, we tend to have like higher levels of baseline stresses and more disconnection, like within ourself, right? Like, so it's just looking at these things, these concepts, these ideas, right? These energies, and consciously choosing to flow in a different direction, consciously. This is quantum timeline jumping 101, right? And how we can close these gaps cellularly is knowing where we come in innately lacking balance on a cellular mineral level, because this is Ayurveda 101. This is the Farmer's Almanac science, okay, guys? So that we can then consciously choose to give our body the nutrients that it's already lacking, and know, like our capstone, our cellular mineral capstone, what we come in deficient is 3 to 4, depending on when you were born and how, the cusp or whatever. But through stress mode, if we're auto accommodating through an anticipatory stress mode type consciousness, you could say, then we're depleting or being imbalanced or slightly deficient in all 12, and this is how we manifest symptoms out of ease with harmony. This is how we can accumulate illness and other types of symptoms that do not feel like ease to experience, that does not feel like harmony. So if this resonates with you guys and you would like a one-on-one personal reading, I am donation based, guys. So you assign the value. If you resonate with this and you would like to identify your patterning, tap into your sovereignty, rewrite your code, hit me up. I would be honored to work with you guys. So until then, I love you. I love you. I love you. Time for you to love you, right? Live, love, be the light. Namaste.